Welcome to the Confidence Formula, week 10. We are talking about the scorers formula this week. Part of the confidence formula, but this is really its own universe, a whole nother formula, a whole nother way of measuring things. So we're going to start with talking about definition of success, something that I learned early on in my coaching career that really changed my mindset around a lot of things and defining my own success. The problem with most measurements of success, and specifically we're talking about scoring and shooting percentages in basketball. And then we're going to explain my favorite measurement, which is points per shot value. And we're going to talk about how using points per shot value allows you to use math to influence your shot selection. So I hear common complaint among coaches: inexperienced players take terrible shots. They don't know a good shot from a bad shot. But my comeback for coaches is like, you haven't taught them what a good shot is or how to measure what a good shot is. And so I want to give you the gift of having criteria to determine what is the best shot available in a situation. Kind of have a hierarchy, priority order of shots that you can go down and think about: how can I get the highest value shot in any given game situation? Can really impact your decision making and just your quality of play very quickly by just changing your thought process. And it all starts from having a method to measure accurately the value of every shot you take. So let's talk about definition of success. With basketball, how most people measure success is simply points, right? Shot went in the basket. If I closed my eyes and hucked it over my head backwards and it went in, then it was a good shot. Smarter people measure success in basketball as field goal percentage, right? So like if I took 100 shots but only made one of them, that percentage is going to show up as 1%. And it's not a good shot to take, right? And fairly common standard is the 180 shooters, actually, what I like to use for field goal percentage. So you have 40% from three and 50% from 2-point range and 90% from free throw. And if you stack up those three numbers, it gives you 180%, but they're not cumulative. That's where the 180 shooter concept come from. And I like that. It's like a good ideal standard to have, but it still doesn't give you as much intelligence, as much info as I'd like you to have. And that's what we're going to talk about with points per shot value. And then the second deeper layer of this is more psychological. How do you actually measure success in anything? So, there's a lot of peer pressure in your age group, a lot of societal measures of success, whether it be getting A+ grade on your academics, whether it be scoring 20 points per game in basketball, whether it's, being the cool guy or the hip girl, whatever the term is for the young people nowadays. I'm not with it anymore. But, being in the in crowd is often an external measure of success that someone else has given you and you're going along with without really ever thinking about it. And what that leads to, in my experience, is a lack of control, both the feeling of having no control and in reality, having no control over your success, because it's an external standard that's applied to you really without any input or, adaptability or customization to actually fit who you are and what you do best and what you enjoy doing. And therefore, you can get way off track, putting a lot of effort into things that other people see as success if you achieve them, but it doesn't actually give you anything. It doesn't make you feel fulfilled or feel successful. And it can also give you a huge volatility of emotions and how you feel about yourself and your sense of self-worth. And why I talk about this is a lot of that stacks up to a lack of confidence. You feel like you don't have control. You feel like you're trying to pursue someone else's standard of success. You're going to be way up and down roller coaster of emotion based on, temporary circumstances and performance. So bringing it back to basketball, if the standard is to make every shot from your coach and to have 0 turnovers for a game, then every shot you miss and every mistake you make means you could be subbed out of the game right away. And you feel like you have no control over that. And so what I see from players is kind of jumping on yourself, self-criticism to get ahead of the coach criticizing you, right? So like you'll mentally, verbally kick yourself after a missed shot to prevent other people from jumping on you. But again, that's all tied back to someone else's standard. And, that brings about a big up and down, emotion, and actually affects your basketball enjoyment and your performance and everything else that we want to be progressing and improving. If you feel like you have no control, you're trying to meet this impossible standard sometimes that coaches lay out for you, and you're trying to kick yourself to prevent the coach from, not physically, but mentally, psychologically, verbally, maybe kicking you for mistakes, your performance is going to go up and down all the time, no matter what. There's way too many variables in the chaos of basketball for you to have any control over that. But if you're having this sense of no control, your emotions are going to go up and down based on your performance. You miss a shot, oh my gosh, my life sucks and I should quit now. I make a shot, I'm riding high, and I'm, chest bumping everybody, and I'm doing my 3-point celebration after a main shot. Whatever it is, you're going to be way up and down, and that's going to affect your performance, and it's really going to affect, coaches, higher level coaches' perception of your maturity and your ability to play. So if you're in 7th, 8th, 9th grade and your high school coach is watching your huge ups and downs and emotions and volatility of performance, they're going to be less likely to really see you as an asset they can bring on their team in high school. So all of this is kind of subconscious, several layers deep in psychology, but it really has an on the court result, which is what I try to tie everything back to. Let's talk about the problem with measurement. If we go with field goal percentage or points, right? Neither of these allow you to compare the efficiency of different types of shots. So we can just say, over the whole game, I scored 20 points, or, I shot 40% of all my shots, 2s and 3s, and whatever, most of that's mixed together. Maybe you could say 2s or 3s, they have a different percentage, but you don't actually know the value of each of those in relation to each other. And so you might know that you got 20 points, you might know that you shot pretty well, but you don't really know what that means on a shot by shot basis or a different type of shot, a comparison basis. So points per shot value is the solution to this problem. Just like field goal percentage is calculated by your total number of made shots divided by your total number of attempted shots, points per shot value is calculated by your total number of points without including free throws, because we're just talking about field goals for now, and divided by your field goal attempts. So points divided by attempts instead of made shots divided by attempts. And this gives you a lot of different intelligence. So it really is the best measure of efficiency. How efficiently did you score? And for a team, like for coaches, I talk to them about analyzing specific plays. Like we love this one out of bounds play, but it might produce, 0.5 points per shot. And if we just get the ball in and run our normal half court set offense, then we score 1 point per shot. And so why are we spending all this time trying to perfect this one out of bounds play that your coach found on YouTube when it's not working for us? And it can also go to specific shots, which is what we're going to get to by the end of today. How do layups versus threes versus mid-ranges, mid-range versus layups, contested versus uncontested. How can we analyze different types of shots and really give ourselves a priority list of what we're trying to get? And then compare my 2-point shot versus my 3-point shot. Like over the course of a season, that can be really telling. I actually make more on my threes than I do on my mid-range twos. And so if I have the chance, I should actually back up and shoot a 3-point shot. And on free throws. So if we take free throws as a separate category, the goal here is to equate everything to a 2-point shot possession. So that's why this really works, is that we can calculate our 3 points and divide it in such a way that it's the same equivalent as if it was a 2-point possession, and show how much more that third point added to our efficiency of scoring points for the number of shots. So free throws, we just take 2 free throws as a chunk and calculate that because it's the equivalent of a 2-point shot. And so we can look at, if you score 50% on your free throws, because they're worth 1 point each time you make it, you're still going to average 1 point for every 2 shots at the free throw line you take. And so that's why it's very easy to get an advantage by getting fouled by the other team, is that every time you go to the free throw line, if you're above 50% as a free throw shooter, which you probably are at this point in your career, then it's just icing on the cake. You're scoring way higher efficiency at the free throw line than your whole team ever has, the whole season, from their average field goal attempt. And so, that's kind of the math behind the cliche statement everybody says, free throws win games. It's like, mathematically, the more you're fouled, the more chances you have to get the same number of points. So a lot, like twice as many shot attempts, means a lower percentage actually equates to still an equal or even higher points per shot value. So we're going to break that down more. This gold standard for points per shot value, this is why I really like it, because the math, once you understand it, is very simple to tell, what's good, what's bad. So 1 point per shot is the gold standard. That's what we're trying to get to all the time. And you'll see teams that are below that and, they struggle, and teams that are above that are in the playoffs and winning championships. And it's very, very small decimal differences that actually equate to a big overall performance difference. And so you can pretty quickly do the math here. If we want to get 1 point per shot, then on a 2-point shot, we need 50% on average. And on a 3-point shot, we only need 33%. And this is what I call the green light standard. You probably heard the term green light shooter. It means that coach says, take threes whenever you have the chance because you're good at making threes. And, they kind of use their eyeball test or who knows what to actually give a green light to shooters. They don't really understand the math behind it, but this is my level, is like, you're averaging 1 point per shot. If you can do that or better, then we want you to take more threes. If you're not getting 33% or better, then we probably don't want you taking threes, and we need you to do something else to get us a more efficient shot. And then it changes based on the level of competition. The level of offensive ability goes up as you go to high school to college to NBA. And I just did a big study. We're going to see some shot charts here in a minute of the current year Celtics in 23-24. They are averaging 1.15 points per shot, compared to the rest of the NBA is right around 1.0. So that means over an NBA game, they get about 100 possessions. Why they score over 100 points very often. It's a longer game. They're playing fast with the shot clock and so forth. But this equates to 15 points, 100 shots taken. If we're averaging 1.15 points per shot, that means we're scoring 115 points on average. Compared to everybody else scoring 100, we're going to win most of the games just on that calculation. And then, if we look at high school, we're usually in the 0.6 to 0.8, not very good at scoring. We have a slower game, no shot clock, less experienced players, less strategic coaches, and, just overall not as skilled yet at scoring. And college is a little bit higher, about 0.8 to 1.0. And so, in my mind, I want to get to that 1.0 because it's a nice round number. These numbers break down to really good performance metrics. And so then if you're playing high school and everybody else is averaging in here and your own team is averaging in here, but you're scoring this, then you're worth 20% more than anybody else taking a shot on your team. Therefore, you're going to have the green light to shoot, and you're going to be able to feel the added value you bring to every possession. Whether you miss a shot or not, you understand that your average value is very high efficiency per shot. And my favorite way to really highlight that is, kind of thinking about the shooter psychology, I like to ask the question, if you are a 3-point shooter and you missed 6 out of 9 shots in a game, like let's say it was even the first 6, right? You took 9 threes over the whole game, but the first 6 you missed in a row. I took 6 threes, maybe in the first 3 quarters of the game. I took 2 shots per quarter and I missed all 6 of them. And most players would feel like a complete failure and not even take another shot for the rest of that game. And even by the end of the game, if they made the last 3, maybe they made a comeback in the fourth quarter, they hit 3 3-pointers in a row to wrap out the game. And what they're going to remember is the 6 misses, because every shooter feels the pain of a miss way more than they feel the celebration of a make. And so what I try to point out is that the 3 shots you made times 3 points gave you 9 points. The 6 misses plus the 3 makes was 9 shot attempts, and therefore you just got 1 point per shot on average, and you're a green light shooter and should keep shooting those shots. And it can dramatically change how you perceive your own shooting performance. Again, most shooters, if I saw you in a game where you had missed 6 shots out of 9, you would feel terrible about yourself and be questioning your life and, wanting to quit basketball maybe. Like you'd be, again, feeling out of control and feeling that volatility of performance, where I would just come to you and say, hey, I tracked your shots and actually you made 9 points out of 9 shots. So you're doing perfect and you should keep shooting. The team aspect, it doesn't matter that we had a really high or really low points per shot value. The big difference maker is the differential between the offense and the defense. So if we can score 0.8 points per shot in high school, but keep the other team scoring only 0.6 points per shot, then we're still going to win by about 20 points, right? Given a 100-shot game, which is not as likely. In high school, it's more like 60 possession game for each team. But regardless, the same math still works. The Celtics are a great example again. That's why I really did a study this week of this to really dig into, how they're operating. And they average 1.15 and hold their opponents to an average of 1.0. And, when they play some of the other higher level playoff teams right now in the West Division, they'll be up in the 1.1 maybe, but the Celtics are still way up at the top at 1.15. And so they're constantly having a more efficient offense that produces a margin. And so if it was, they had a bad shooting night and only scored 1.0, if their defense was still doing great and they could hold their opponent down to 0.9, then they would still have a differential to win the game, even if they were not having a great scoring day. And this is, again, why this is the math behind the cliche that defense wins games, is that it's really the difference in efficiency. So even if we're having a terrible scoring night, or maybe we're just a terrible shooting team in general, we could do a lot of work on our defense and just hold our opponents down below where we are so that we constantly have a margin. And that's why people say defense wins games, which I tend to not agree with, but there is an aspect to that. If you need to, you can do the work to hold an opponent down and make sure you have a margin. I think it's easier to have a margin by having really intelligent, fast-paced, and skilled offense. But again, the margin is the important part here. And the margin, the difference between 2 different types of shots, is what I want to bring to you on the individual basis, which we're going to get into more in a minute. But let's look at the Celtics, because like I said, there's a great example of why they are efficient and why this comes about and why it looks this way on a shot chart. So their actual hottest spot is in this corner. For whatever reason, this side and not so much this side, like they're pretty good all the way around the 3-point arc, but for whatever reason, this corner is a particular hot spot for this season Celtics team, 44%, which I'll break down the math of that in a second. But what I want to see here from the whole shot chart, this is their whole season so far, going into the playoffs. They shoot a lot of threes. and a lot of deep paint twos and not much else. They are hardly ever taking shots out here. And the question I would ask you to think about is why the highest level performing team in the whole NBA is not taking any mid-range or what we would call long two shots. I'll explain more. So let's talk about the points per shot value. So this is the deep paint. This is the dark blue area where they've taken the most shots. So they can made almost 1,700 out of 2,669 shots. And differential here is even noticeable. They're making 63.7. The rest of the league is averaging 59.9. So they got a margin, even on layups. For whatever reason, their offense is creating better quality shots. So given 63.7%, I just rounded up to 64% to make the math a little simpler for you to follow. But 64% times 2 points for each shot they made that they averaged 64% on, they were getting 2 points when they did make it. That averages out to 1.28 points per shot. That means every time they take a layup, it's worth 1.28. And the rest of their shots that they take all over the rest of the court, the rest of the game that's not a layup, is pulling that down to the 1.15 we talked about already. That's their actual team average for the season. And so 1.28 means they should be taking more layups whenever they get a chance. And that's one thing they're doing really well at this season. This is above the break threes. So I showed you the corner threes as a separate category. I didn't want to get into all the different segments of the three because I want to keep this a little more high level and get you the basic concept. But 3-point shots, again, they made 370 out of 1,003, 36.9%, just slightly higher than the league. That's pretty average. But at 37% on a 3-point shot, it's not the percentage times 2 anymore, it's the percentage times 3. And so that adds up to 1.11 points per shot value. So it's still above 1.0. It's not quite at 1.15, but it's closer to the 1.28 they got for a layup than anywhere else on the court. And if we had that right corner where it was 44%, if you can think about the calculation there is 44% times 3 points makes it 1.32 points per shot, which is higher than the layup. And that's where this stat really gets you thinking and makes things crazy. Because if you're shooting 44%, if you're Steph Curry or you're Drew Holiday in that or in particular corner, then you're better off shooting that shot than the rest of the team trying to shoot a layup. And that can dramatically change your mindset when you're on offense. But this is important because the next one shows the mid-range, what we call non-paint twos. So this is everything outside the paint that is not a 3-point shot. So between free throw line and 3 is where they highlighted here to just show this whole category. 44.2%. So again, slightly above the league. They're a skilled team. When they take these shots, they're still making them at a pretty good clip, but this is not a very good shot. This is the same 44% as they shot in that 3-point right corner, but it's only worth 2 points. So now it's a terrible shot because 44% times 2 points is only 0.88, right? And if our average is 1.15 and our layups are 1.28, then every time we take one of these, we are killing our percentage, right? If they flipped the switch and decided to not take any more threes this season and they took all long twos in this space, then they would quickly drop to maybe the bottom of the league efficiency and scoring, and they'd lose their playoff games pretty quickly. And so this is where, if I asked you the question, what's the order of shots you should take? Most people would say layups and then mid-range and then threes. But this is why the game has changed. And if I go back up to this is why this is happening. This is the proof of why this works. And stats have guided a lot of coaches and now a lot of players understand this at the NBA level, especially. When you take threes at a similar percentage of twos, you get 1 point more per shot every time you do so, even though you're shooting a lower percentage, you make up for it in scoring more points overall. So this is where I see, in the NBA, uncontested shots. If you look up stats for that, it's really crazy. Like they can stand anywhere on the court and make 60, 70% or more. So let's start in the deep paint again first. This is our highest value. If we can get uncontested deep paint shots, like this is a dunk where nobody's there to stop you. This is a fast break layup when nobody's nearby to contest it, right? And we'll get into the definition of contest in a minute. But uncontested, we're going to make 95%. And the cool thing is about contesting, if you're looking at a defensive standpoint, you're going to cut the percentage in half or just about half anytime you bother the shooter by getting your hand up in their face and bothering them and contesting their shot. And so 95% when there's nobody around drops all the way to 45% when there is somebody contesting. And that's where, on average, the Celtics get 64%. A lot of them are contested, probably more so than uncontested, because you're near the rim and there's a lot of defense hanging around, and Wembanyama's there trying to block everything in sight. And so that drops a lot every time you're contested, but they do get some uncontested, and so it averages out to somewhere in the 65, 64% for the whole season. And then mid-range is similar. If you give an NBA player uncontested mid-range shot, whether they're off the dribble or off the catch, they're going to score around 70%. They're just that good at shooting. And contested, they're going to drop about in half again, 35%. And again, they're going to get more shots contested than uncontested. And so that average is weighted a little bit lower than halfway between. And that's where they average out to 44%. And again, because it's a 2-point shot, this is the one we don't want to shoot. And why that space is empty between the two. And then we go out to 3-point shots, uncontested. They're still going to shoot about 60%, which if you've ever been in a practice and watched shooters shoot, like when there's nobody nearby and they're just doing practice shots, they make them at an incredible rate. It's crazy to watch. But still, contested, they're going to drop in half. And so that makes it 30% when they're contested. And because there's intense defense, especially as we get into playoff time, the average drops down to 37%. It's what we showed, around the arc, except for their one hot spot. The Celtics averaged only 37%. But again, doing the math, that's still to their advantage to shoot 37% worth 3 instead of shooting 44% worth 2. So let's talk about the math of shot selection. So the average percentage can give you some guidance on what shots you want to take more of. So we just did the deep paint is 64% times 2 points, gave us 1.28. 3-point shots, if we could average 40%, would be times 3 points, 1.2 points per shot. Mid-range, 44% times 2 points is 0.8 points per shot. And this is where we can get into the free throw equivalent. The Celtics are actually doing incredibly well. They're shooting 80% on the season for free throws. And so because they get 2 attempts each time, it's 2 times 80% to get the free throw points per shot value. So assuming they're taking 2 every trip, right? And, even if they have an odd number, we can average that out by just doing division. So 80% times 2 points is 1.6 points per possession would be another way to say that. It's like equating it to a 2-point shot, even though they're doing 2 shots one at a time. We are trying to get a apples to apples comparison to a 2-point possession. And so this is why, again, free throws win games, is that every time they foul you, you can get 2 chances at making up the same points. And so this is where I said a minute ago, even if you shoot 50% times 2 points is 1.0, right? And so if you're whatever level you're playing at, like if you're in high school and your team average is 0.8, but when you get fouled, you hit 50% of your shots and you score 1.0 for that possession, you're actually, defense is putting you in an advantage situation every time they foul you. And that's even if you're a terrible, terrible free throw shooter at only 50%, right? Most of us are going to be 65, 70, maybe up to 80% by the time we're at a varsity high school level. And so every little bit above 50% that you can improve your free throw shooting is just icing on the cake, where you're punishing that defense every time they foul you because you're more efficient at the free throw line than you could ever be, even for your whole team on average, taking a field goal attempt. So let's get into contested versus uncontested, because this is really the biggest differentiator. And this is where you can make a huge jump in your efficiency on offense, as well as your impact on defense by just understanding how this works. So I broke down a minute ago with my circles, different layers. Players at all levels miss twice as many shots when they're contested as when they're uncontested. 70% uncontested NBA three-point shooter gets down to only 35% in contested shot in a game. 80% mid-range shooter is only 40% in a game. 95% uncontested layup is only 45% in a game. And so the definition I like to use actually came from a mentor I mentioned in the past, Ron Ecker, kind of gave me this idea of just a grading level for really grading our defense, but also calibrating our offense and what shots we're taking. So I call it the 6-foot bubble, basically having 3 different levels of a contest happening. So level 0 is where I see most players. They're a little too far away. They don't think the shooter is a very good shooter, so they give no effort. They don't close the gap. They stay outside the 6-foot bubble with their hands down, no jump, no contest, and the player is pretty much uncontested and gets a free shot and makes it twice as much. Even if they miss one, on average over a whole game, especially over a whole season, they're going to make twice as many shots. Level 1 contest means you're giving a little bit of effort. Maybe you were a little out of position, but you're trying to close the gap. You got your hand up and you're coming at them, but you're probably still outside of 6 feet. Or maybe you were inside of 6 feet, but you were turned around, or you didn't give full effort and your hand was still down. You're kind of in the vicinity bothering them, but they're still getting somewhat of a free shot because you're not close enough to really threaten to block them or contest their vision like we've practiced before on defense. And then a level 2 contest means your hand is up and you're inside 6 feet. Like you are actively trying to distract them, annoy them, put your hand in their vision, potentially even block their shot, or at least get them to perceive you as a threat to blocking their shot. And that's where we see the percentage drop precipitously every time they have a contested shot. And again, they're going to make some of those, but we're playing the probability game. If we continually contest every shot with all of our effort, trying to make everything a level 2, they're going to miss twice as many shots overall over the course of a game, and especially on a bigger sample size over the course of a season. If your whole team is trying to contest shots, you'll see your defense rating go way up, and the other team's field goal percentage and the other team's points per shot value go way down because of just consistently contesting every shot with as much effort as you can and not caring when they make some of them because you have a bigger picture perspective. You are defining success differently, and then therefore you feel in control and you don't care if they hit a big shot in your face. You're going to be there next time and contest it the same anyway. So let me show you what this 0-1-2 contest looks like. Coach Ken and I worked through this to kind of give us an idea. We're going to show level 0. He's there, but he's not trying. His hands stay down. He's kind of just letting me shoot it. And most of the time I'm able to make it. Again, he's a little bit farther away. He doesn't feel like he could get there to block me or contest me, so he doesn't try. His hands are down. And then a level 1, he's going to close a little bit. He's going to try to put his hand up, at least influence me, even if he's not jumping, but he's still outside of 6 feet, so can't really get bothered. Then he's coming at me, level 2. He's trying to close the gap and get up in my face and try to get me to miss by putting some effort into it. And whether his timing is perfect or not, he's trying to close that gap and get his hand up so that he can influence whether I make or miss. And most of the time, just as we saw, I'm going to miss most of the shots when he's there just doing anything he can to distract me. Let's give you the priority list. This is one of my favorite things, favorite points in this course to deliver this checklist to you and hopefully forever change your thinking. So I've got kind of rounded numbers based on where I think of like a high school level ideal here is what I'm going for. And you can actually measure this for yourself and figure out, where are these numbers for you and kind of self-calibrate where this list should be. So uncontested layup, assuming we're scoring at about 90%, nobody's around, we're going to make a layup most of the time, 1.8 points per shot. That's our golden ideal shot. If we can get uncontested layups, whether that's on fast breaks or that's on back cuts or that's off of screens, however we can get it, if we can get layups with nobody there to contest us, we're going to score the most points possible. Free throws are second because of the factor I already talked through. You get 2 tries at making up the same point value. Whatever you shoot 50% or higher is icing on the cake. Most of us are going to shoot 1.4 or higher because we're a 70%-ish free throw shooter. Uncontested 3-point shot is next. Assuming you can make it about 40% when there's nobody around, it's like a practice shot. Pretty average if you're in 7th, 8th, 9th grade or higher. Uncontested mid-range. So this is where this actually is a useful tool. I think about it like we talked through last week with our shot creation off the dribble. It's the space that you're using, right? So there might be no chance at a catch and shoot 3-pointer that's uncontested, and there's definitely people at the rim that are going to contest if you go all the way to the basket. And so maybe there's a big hole in the defense and you can rise up and get uncontested mid-range shot, and therefore that is a higher value than any of the next shots, which would be contested. So kind of repeat the same list. Contested layup drops in half. We get 0.9 points per shot. Contested 3-point shot, cut in half, makes it 0.6 points per shot. Contested mid-range is like the shot we never want to take if we can possibly help it. This is 0.5 points per shot. This is half of the value we want to be shooting for, which is 1.0. And so my whole approach is addition by subtraction. If you just scratch this shot off your list and never take a contested mid-range shot, your efficiency goes up automatically. You're going to pull it back, maybe shoot the 3 off of a step back or a retreat dribble, or you're going to give it up to a teammate, get it back somewhere else, or maybe retreat dribble and re-attack the basket. You're going to try to find a different way to get a shot off. The only exception to that would be buzzer beater at the end of a shot clock if you're playing 3x3, or it's the end of the game and you have to hit a shot in order to keep the game going, whether you're tying it or winning the game. Contested mid-range should only be taken if absolutely necessary. And again, if you just scratch that off your list and never take another mid-range contested shot the rest of your life, your whole scoring efficiency will go way, way up. So this brings us to some interesting choices. So this is where it starts to apply to decision making in a big way. If we have the choice of a contested layup, my favorite scenario here is after a rebound, because everybody says go straight up, and you might be contested in 5 different ways by your teammates in your way and 4 defenders. Who knows what's going on in the paint, but it's a mess most of the time. And so you're going to probably get the contested percentage, you're going to get 0.9 points per shot. Or if you kick it out to a 3-point shooter that's wide open, they might be able to get 1.05 points per shot, right? So they're a little bit lower percentage. They're not a 40% shooter, they're a 35% shooter, but they're the best shooter on your team, and you have a contested layup that's 2 feet from the basket, but contested versus a wide open 3-point shooter that's uncontested. We want to take this every time we get the chance. So that's where I get to rebounding and putbacks is like, if it's one-on-one, I'll take it. I'll go at the guy. Maybe I'll draw a foul, but I'll be pretty sure I'm going to score it. If it's a double team where there's just a mess of people in the way, that means my shooter's open. If I can just find him, we're going to get a better shot. And again, if we scratch off the contested shot, even if he doesn't take this wide open 3, but we kick it out, we reset our offense, we come up with a different shot, any kind of shot that's uncontested, we're going to be better off. So then for yourself on a catch, should you shoot the uncontested 3-point shot or drive to a contested layup? And this is where our order of operations comes up, where we've played a lot off the catch one-on-one. Closeout is we want to shoot the uncontested three. If we can shoot it before the defense is there and there's no contest in our face, that's the best shot we're going to get. Driving into a contested layup throws a lot more variables in our way where, we're going to be contested. We might be bumped. We might get fouled, but it not be called. And, putting less things in our control. So we want to take uncontested shots any chance we get it. First shot available that's uncontested is usually the best shot. And then should we shoot a mid-range contested jumper or reset the offense, right? And I kind of gave away the answer already for this one, but if you're about to shoot a mid-range contested shot in that long 2-point range, the no man's land on the Celtics shot chart, you could just pull back, retreat, dribble, reset the offense, and find a better shot. So again, scratch that off your list to have addition by subtraction for your efficiency. All right, summarizing, define your own success. This has kind of 2 layers of meaning, like I talked about. Both in basketball, figure out how to measure your success so that you have control. And in general, in your life, look at what everyone else is doing, what all the expectations are out there that are being put on you from other people, and decide intentionally if you're going to use those for how you measure success for yourself, or if you're going to come up with your own and ignore what everybody else says and focus on what means success to you, what fulfills you. Memorize points per shot and use it. Use it for yourself. You could use it for your team. You could measure yourself over one game or one tournament, over a whole season, and over your whole career. Like I really like doing this with players from year to year. So you could look at, hey, my 7th grade year, I scored 0.2 points per shot, right? I was terrible. And my 8th grade year, I scored 0.4. And my freshman year, I scored 0.6. And like you can track yourself, track your gains as we've talked about in the past. Instead of looking at the gap like, oh, I'm not at 1.0, I'm not an NBA Celtics level yet. Look at where was I yesterday? And just by changing my thinking, not really changing much about my technique or my athleticism, how can I progress that? What has changed over a period of time? It can be pretty cool. And then lastly, most importantly, is be selective with your shots. Eliminate the habit of taking bad shots is really the biggest change you can make. By not taking any more contested mid-range, you're going to become a more efficient scorer. That's it. I know this was a long one. I'm probably going to break it into 2 chunks because it's a lot to digest, a lot of basketball math. But I look forward to talking through this and actually using this as we're on the court and scoring games and discussing efficiency over the next couple of weeks. I'll see you on the court.